let's reimagine the way that CIOs, the way that technology, the way that systems are used at institutions. At the end of the day, I wanted to work for a school because I wanted to work with students. I wanted to work with teachers. I come from a long line of teachers. My whole family is all teachers, right? And at the end of the day, I want to feel authentic in the work that I'm doing, right? And if your job is to make kids educated, that's unbelievable, right? Somebody's going to pay me for that?
Can you hear the enthusiasm in that voice? That's our guest, Nathan Gault. He's the CIO of the Stevenson School in Pebble Beach, California. And this week, he brings a fresh and exciting perspective on the power that emerges when technology has a strategic connection. He takes us on his journey from the hallowed halls of Yale to the cutting-edge classrooms of Stevenson, revealing an untold story of how a visionary technology leader is upending the way independent schools harness the power of data. This conversation is made possible with the support of Community Brands. Stay tuned to learn more. And now, Jeff Shields and Howard Teibel with our guest, Nathan Gault.
Thank you, Pete. Howard, we're back again.
This is super exciting, Jeff.
This is good, and we're covering a lot of ground, I'd say. We've been covering a wide variety of topics because independent schools, especially business leaders in independent schools, their portfolios are huge. So it's really right to cover a lot of different things that we want to cover that are impacting independent schools today. We have a great guest today. Howard, why don't you introduce him to the audience?
Yes. So we have Nathan Gault from the Stevenson School. Nathan, it's great to have you here today.
I'm very happy to be here.
You know, we have a fantastic topic based on the role that you play at Stevenson as their CIO. And it comes after the Net Assets magazine just put out an article that was focusing on streamlining data operations. In this conversation, we want to lift this up to a level of thinking about it from a strategic perspective. But let's start with something really interesting. You were at Yale University, then somehow you got out of Yale, went to private sector, and now you're at a K through 12 independent schools in Pebble Beach. What happened?
What were you thinking, Nathan?
What were you thinking?
I think the end of that comment is the important one. It's in Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach, California is not the worst place in the world to live. So that was certainly an alluring aspect of this job. But, you know, it's true. I was at Yale for an extremely long time. I worked in a lot of web development, business transformation kind of stuff. I was sort of at Yale when the web was becoming a thing, was a new thing. I still remember having some conversations with some deans where, you know, they were talking about, is email really going to last? And sort of being the young guy in the room saying, I think it's here to stay. I think we need to adopt to this, right? So I was at Yale, you know, really pushing, you know, we need to use the web. The web is a fabulous tool for sort of getting our work done. But I was really also on I would like to say I was on the sort of the business side of things, like how do academic institutions run? How do we get kids into seats? How do we collect their tuition? How do we, you know, do all of those sort of admin kind of things? I sort of stayed out of the classroom, right? But I was always a guy who was sort of like, hey, these technology tools are amazing. They should make it easier for us to accomplish the tasks that we need to do in order to run these institutions. But Yale's a huge place. So, you know, there were times, you know, I was a young guy there too. So there were times when it's...
You look like you're still a young guy. You haven't aged.
Oh, thank you very much. But, you know, it was sort of hard to, it's sort of hard to get a voice and to also, you know, drive the Titanic when you're at a place like Yale. You know, we all see we're going to hit that iceberg, but you can't really turn the ship because it's just such a big thing, right? So, then my story is I went into sort of the private sector. I went to work for a company called Technolutions. And the story there is that when I was at Yale, I hired a student worker, a man named Alexander Clark, and he worked in our office, and he helped us develop a way to release decisions over the web. And that was Slate 1.0, a product called Slate. Alexander continued to develop that product and launched a company. And today, Slate is the industry standard system that colleges and universities use for their admissions offices. So the story is that one day I reconnected with Alexander, and he said, hey, I have 13 clients now. Would you come back to Technolutions and work with me? I came back to Technolutions, saw the product Slate, said, this thing's incredible. Long story short, that, we went from 13 clients to, something like 1,500 clients overnight.
You're at Yale and you're a thoughtful guy. You're in business operations. You see tech as a solution. A lot of schools have big tech dreams, but don't have big tech budgets. Weren't you concerned kind of moving from Yale? I know you spent some time in the private sector, but going into Stevenson School, did you consider that? Will they have the resources for me to do the work I really want to do?
Yeah, well, that's so the end of the story there is I ended up leaving Technolutions because I wanted to go back to education, and I wanted to go back to a place like Stevenson. Stevenson's perfect because it's small enough to be able to sort of experiment in an effective way. But I really wanted to go back to an institution and say, let's upend the way that these institutions are actually run from a tech perspective, right? And it's really hard to do that at some place like Yale because it's so huge. It's really effective and fun to do it at a place like Stevenson because we're the right size, right? And we're resourced enough. We are resourced enough to be able to take a risk, right? And to sort of say, hey, let's reimagine the way that institutions are actually run using technology and data systems, right? Stevenson's the best place to do this, right? Because it's challenging enough, but it's small enough to be able to do this.
This reminds me a lot of a conversation, and come back to you, Nathan, around that these projects, we think about them on the surface as technology projects, but in the end, they're people projects, right? It has to do with orienting people to be able to focus on what we're trying to do in the end. So if you elevate beyond the technology and you think about stepping into Stevenson, what was your high level objective that you wanted to communicate to leadership in the community about the role of technology from a strategic perspective?
Yeah, perfect. So, again, I'm like, my brain is whizzing here, right? Because it is the reason why I came to Stevenson was because I wanted to have more of a discussion at the people level. Where I really have good skills is being able to get into a room with somebody and sort of demystify the technology and break it down to just a human to human level. What is it that you're trying to do? What is your job?
Why is that so hard, Nathan, for people to make that mental pivot to the outcome versus the actions?
Well, that's what's been really fascinating about this experience so far, right? Like, I thought those conversations were going to be pretty easy, and remarkably, those are some of the hardest conversations, right? Because I think a lot of times I'm sitting down and I'm meeting with people and saying, what is it that turn off the computer for a minute, turn off everything, and let's just talk about what you do. And you know what they oftentimes want to say? They want to say, well, I come in and I push that button. I export that data. Well, why do you do that? Why do you do that? Because that's what I've always done. That's what the system tells me to do, right? Like, we bought a system, and this system actually says, I need to take these steps to do these things. And I'm sort of the guy that says, well, let's just pause for a minute, like turn that off for a minute, and let's just talk about if you could do anything, if you could invent it any way, right? A student comes into your office and you're the dean of students, and they come in, and how would you like them to check in if you could do anything, right? What would you like the first thing that they do to be?
The reason I would say, Jeff, and I'd love to hear your perspective, because you have to raise it for NBOA, the big why, why we exist, what we're trying to serve. I think part of the challenge, Nathan, is that the big questions have an ambiguous quality to it. It requires people to stop and think about something other than what's right in front of them. And Jeff, can't you relate to that as you think about even positioning yourself?
Well, I just think in general, asking the question why. I think sometimes why is a very hard, challenging question to answer for people. And especially if you keep saying it, why is that important? Why is that important? You see, people can really struggle. So I think it's great. But I love, Nathan, that you came in. I mean, you didn't come in saying, I see Stevenson as my big petri dish. I'm going to get to experiment with all these great tech ideas that I maybe wouldn't be able to experiment with. At the same time, right? So you're not going to lead with that. What you are going to lead with is, I'm here to solve your problems. I'm here to understand them and help you solve them. That's probably better said.
I need to jump in and say that when I first got here, it was actually more the former, right? We were in petri dish land, right? Like, so when I got here, this has been the experience, right? When I got here, a lot of people said, I sort of had this reputation of, oh, he's the Slate guy and he's going to bring a new system and the Slate is going to fix everything here, right? This was before the pandemic. This is under a different leadership model. This is right. And I sort of came in and was like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to use this product. And my thinking has completely flipped in the time that I've been here, right? We came in and I said, okay, yeah, I have a big advantage because I know Slate. And so we're gonna turn our admissions office into a Slate world. We're gonna turn our advancement office into a Slate world.
What did Stevenson cue to you? I mean, how did you know that they were ready for this level of experimentation? How did you know they were ready for you coming in with that kind of mindset? I mean, what was it? Was it insider information? Was there someone that said, Nathan, we really need you. We're really struggling with our systems and our data doesn't talk to each other. It's not very clean. We need someone to really do a complete overhaul? Or was there something Stevenson did? Because let me tell you something, based on my experience, every independent school does not have that same risk tolerance, the one that you're describing you encountered at Stevenson.
The truth of the matter is that the president at the time, I had a relationship with him at Yale. And so he knew the work that I had been doing at Yale, sort of coming in and, working with boots on the ground. How do you want to do these things, right? And he sort of saw some of the transformation that I brought to Yale. And then, truth be told, like working at Technolutions, you have a lot of touch points with a lot of institutions all over the place, right? So Stevenson was interested in buying Slate to run admissions, which is what everybody buys Slate to do, right? And so I was sort of in the room saying, listen, this is an opportunity for you if you have the guts. This is an opportunity for you to say, let's not only get this product, but let's reimagine the way that CIOs, the way that technology, the way that systems are used at institutions, right? Like we've talked about this before. I don't in any way, shape, or form want this to be an infomercial for Slate, right? Because at the end of the day, what I really bring and what's been transformational at Stevenson, in my opinion, is that we're having conversations at the human level. We're having conversations in individual offices. My team often just works with people and we just get out flow charts and we say, what happens next? What happens next? What do you wish would happen next, right? And we just do a lot of thinking about like, if you could do this in any way, shape, or form, like just, be creative. Tell us how you would love to do it. Now, that leads to the second part of the conversation, which is I have a remarkable team. I have an incredible group of people that work with me, right? And I brought them over from Slate worlds, right? And we can then sit into a room and we can say, okay, we can build that into a reality using the technology tools that we have. And Slate happens to be a really remarkable tool, but it's just a tool.
It's a tool that you have identified that enables your larger goals, right? It enables you to do what you want to do. But Howard, I have to go back to, it's all about relationships. It's always about relationships. Like I was like, wait, how did Nathan know that Stevenson would be up for this? Well, he had a previous connection. He had a relationship. And someone you and I both know, John Walda from Nakubo, who was the CEO of Nakubo, the last words he said to me when I left for MBOA were, remember, Jeff, it's always about relationships. Yeah. And here we have, this is a tech discussion that starts with a relationship that leads to a transformation at an independent school.
There are people listening to this that are from across the country that are heads of schools, business officers, IT folks, and they have maybe their own version of Slate or their own system of integrating this data. And they're intrigued about what you're doing. When you look at what you have produced and where you are, because I'm sure you're not where you want to be in the end, what are some messages that you'd want to tell folks who are looking to make significant progress to get their people to think more strategically, not what they want to do, but why they want to do it, that you have either encountered at Stevenson or maybe even discussions with other CIOs at other independent schools?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that I would say is this is not just independent schools. This is small colleges. This is big universities. In my opinion, the trajectory that we are on in terms of data systems and the use of technology to run schools, it is the way that we're currently doing it is not sustainable. I do not think that it is a sustainable model to say, just continue to add more stars to our constellation, right? We've moved into this, I refer to it as the Big Bang, right? I was sort of there at Yale when everybody was like, oh, the web is this remarkable thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts hanging a shingle and they're saying, I'm selling a product that can solve A. I'm selling a product that can solve B. I'm solving a product that can solve D. Right. And we've evolved into a place where we want quick solutions. We want it to be like, okay, can I just buy that app? Can I just buy that system? Can I just buy that thing to make it run? Truth be told, when I got to Stevenson, I ran into this a lot, right? I would go and have meetings with people and I'd say, hi, I'm the CIO. I just wanted to connect with you. And the first thing that they would say to me is, oh, I use this thing over at this other school. Can we buy it? Can you help me buy it? And I think the more traditional notion of what an IT office does is that's our job. Our job is to go buy these things and to help set them up and then to make sure that they all talk to each other. I just see this as, I call it the Big Bang, right? It's continuing to expand. It's just we're adding more and more stars to this constellation, right? I want to buy this thing to do this. I want to buy this thing to do this. The IT office is then tasked with everything from anything that requires electricity. People will say, hey, I call the IT office to change the toner in the copy machine, to the other end of the spectrum where it's like, oh yeah, but I also need you to help me with major business transformation efforts.
It's not sustainable because our schools need this information. They need to be able to pull accurate, reliable data to make decisions. One of the things that is referenced in the article is we're moving away from making anecdotal decisions to making really data-informed decisions because schools need to make better decisions and data is the way for them to do it. So not only if they are working with 20, 50, whatever disparate systems that aren't talking to each other, not only is that a spider web to deal with, but it is we're not accessing the information that we need to move the school forward. I mean, that's what I think is really key.
Yeah. When we get pulled in to help with not the work you do, but help with that kind of collaboration and acceleration, one of the inhibitors that prevents things moving forward is senior leadership, not just buy-in, but commitment to this new way of looking at it. So this idea of slowing down, and in the absence of leadership, being willing to put a stake in the ground and saying, we support this new direction and we're going to advocate for it publicly, these things don't move forward. So how are you getting your senior leadership, your head, the people that are at the vice presidential level, the admin team or whatever they're called, to advocate for where you're going?
Yeah, so it's been, so I've been at Stevenson for 5 years and it has been, I almost see this as like our sort of coming out party at the end of a very long, arduous journey. So, at the beginning we came in guns blazing, but almost immediately we were faced, and we had the support of a president, right? The president was like, I want to be bold and I want to try something new, right? And so we sort of were, we were out there. But then almost immediately we were faced with a global pandemic. My job immediately shifts into, hey, you got to make this school remote. It has nothing to do with, data integrity. It's just like, can we teach these kids online, right? We had a change in leadership at the presidential level, right? We had a lot of topsy-turviness that was happening. In the meantime, I'm trying to build a team, right? And also change a culture. We're trying to do that all in 5 years. Those are the most difficult development conditions I have ever experienced in my entire life. To answer your question, how are we still sticking with this? Really, at the end of the day, we currently have a president. He's a data-driven kind of guy, right? Dan Griffiths, he's a data scientist at the end of the day. He loves data. He wants to make data-informed decisions. And I think we just got to a place where we've had enough success with what we're trying to do. Really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, we're trying to consolidate as much of the data into Slate as possible, right? And to be able to show leadership and folks around campus that it's easier for us to give them the data that they want when we have this consolidated and the data, easily accessible, right? So I think where we got to was we have a data scientist as a president who could see, oh my gosh, I can get answers to my questions fairly quickly.
So Jeff, that's huge, because what that does is that's a great reminder, is that we got to be listening for what our senior leaders care about. You got a data scientist as a head of school. He is going to see what's happening here and be able to connect with it. So that's an important message for anybody trying to move an initiative forward is, are we paying attention to the listening of the people who are going to go out and say, I support this and I'm going to give you the resources you need. That's a critical skill.
Super critical. I had a moment, he wouldn't mind me telling the story, but I sort of had a moment with the new president where, when he was appointed, I sort of sat down and said, you got to pick A or B, right? Like, are we going to go with the traditional model where, the IT office is going to basically says, aye to, anybody wants to buy a system, we're going to help set it up. And then we're going to just be in the world of trying to translate and get these things to talk to each other. Or do you want to be a little bit bold and risky and continue with this notion of saying, hey, can we use a product that is really, at the end of the day, it's untested in this kind of environment?
So let me ask you this then. What is your biggest challenge today?
The biggest challenge today, I would say, is we continue to learn more and more about what is it to have divisions and at an independent school. So we're doing a really fabulous job with admissions, right? And we have very strong leadership and the folks there know what they're doing. We're doing a really fabulous job in our advancement office, right? We have all of the data in the same system, right? So, I don't have to go look at 2 different records to see that information, right? And then what we're trying to do is we're squeezing out the middle. We're squeezing out all of the administrative work that happens at the divisional level, right? So registrarial work, right? This fall, what we're doing is we're launching the registrarial modules in Slate. Right. So we're sunsetting our entire registrarial system and bringing it into Slate. Right. That's going to give us access to all the grade data, all the teacher data, all the classroom data. Right. We had access to that data before, but we had to make leaps. Now we're just going to consolidate it into Slate. Not only does that save us a tremendous amount of money, but it also just makes it easier for us to get to that data. Right. But the challenge at the moment is, and, I think my colleagues would echo this, is we're still in a world of learning what we don't know, right? So meeting with the dean's office, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you do punishments? How do you do accolades? How do you do, right? And a lot of times, a lot of these things are just individuals working in their office on spreadsheets. And so my job as CIO is to say, how do I thread this all the way from admissions through advancement, everything in the middle, academics, athletics, counseling, learning support. There's so many opportunities, but all of these different units, they've lived, back to my Big Bang theory, they've all lived on their own little planets.
To wrap things up, you talked about an aspiration to create an AI overlay to the great work you've already done. How is that going to turbocharge this effort? What do you see kind of down the road in the future? Everyone's thinking about, how is AI going to impact my work, enable my work, or allow me to do more? But you mentioned that in the article. So what do you see coming at Stevenson in that regard?
I think that's one of the most exciting things and one of the things I was not anticipating, right? So when I got to Stevenson, I sort of said, listen, it makes sense for us to consolidate all this data because it's easier then for a data scientist or a data analyst to look at this data and show me what the patterns are, right? What I was not anticipating was that AI was going to come onto the scene so quickly. And in a lot of ways, I'm sort of like, do I really need to hire a data analyst to do this work now? Because now Stevenson's in a remarkable position because we've consolidated so much data into a single system. Slate has AI hooks already built in, and they're starting to experiment more and more with adding these hooks in there, right? So like, for example, I want to write an email, but I don't want to like start from scratch, have the system write me a first draft. That's like at one end of the spectrum. But we're in a really remarkable position now to say, but we can ask really sophisticated questions of our data and ask the AI to sort of do a first draft for us. Everything's in a single system. So it's like, that's what AI needs.
It comes back to that, though. It comes back to that, doing the work to get your data, your clean data together in one system that you can access.
That's absolutely right. And the biggest challenge is changing that culture, right? To say, hey, turn off your computer for a minute and let's just talk about what is it that you're trying to do? And then how do we build that in a way that you feel good about it? And I'm also getting what I need at a higher institutional level so that the president's happy.
Howard, what I think is so great what we've covered today, what is possible. And Nathan's really laid out a roadmap, regardless of where your school is today, but really a roadmap of where you can go with your data. And there are solutions out there, and there are opportunities, and how it will benefit your school is so clear, but it starts with people. It starts with people and the culture.
And I'll tell you something, the other takeaway, Jeff, for me is Nathan's enthusiasm. You know, it's a message to anybody in a leadership role, is that you really got to care enough about the arc of where we're trying to go. This is a heavy lift. It's much easier to just sit behind a closed room and manipulate technology than it is to get out there with people. And what I think you're doing, which is a great message for other CIOs and leaders, is that these are fundamentally the skills needed in these kinds of roles is working with others to influence them to think bigger picture. And historically, that's not been the role of the CIO. And that's another big pivot, I think, that you're bringing, Nathan, that's really fantastic and a great message for the audience listening to this.
At the end of the day, I wanted to work for a school because I wanted to work with students. I wanted to work with teachers. I come from a long line of teachers. My whole family is all teachers, right? And at the end of the day, I want to feel authentic in the work that I'm doing, right? And if your job is to make kids educated, that's unbelievable, right? That is, somebody's going to pay me for that? That's unbelievable.
And that is why Nathan left the private sector and came to a school like Stevenson, right there, what he just said, because you want your impact to be greater than, right? Maybe the sum of its parts, or however you want to put it. But that's really exciting. And I feel that from you. I hear that from you. And we moved through it quickly. But I think that authenticity, when you went in to change the culture or have these conversations, that authenticity and your enthusiasm for the mission likely came through. And that also enabled you to move at such a great speed to these types of really significant changes. That's great, Nathan.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
For sure. Well, Howard, I think that's all we have time for today.
That's it, baby.
Wow. I got a big dose of data and tech and AI. I think we're going to end it there.
Yeah, I think that we have given people enough to think about, to take back into their lives. And what do you got going on looking forward, Jeff? Anything exciting for you?
I think this year, I'm going to be, every conversation like this one is going to circle back to AI in some way, shape, or form. We're trying to figure it out with students. We're trying to figure out with the business office. And Nathan, even someone who's very tech savvy, he's trying to figure out how AI is going to supercharge my work. So I think every conversation, this is the first of many I'll have that will include AI.
Maybe we need to do a road trip to Pebble Beach.
I think we need to have an AI and education conference, and there's really beautiful facilities here at Stevenson.
Did Yanni ask you to say that?
I'm making that plug entirely, but it's
excellent.
68 degrees every day.
He would agree, and he brags about your beautiful campus and your beautiful location a lot. So thanks for spending time with us at the Net Assets Podcast. We really appreciate you.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
The Net Assets Podcast is produced in partnership with NBOA and Tybal Education Consulting, with direct support from Community Brands. K-12 schools need a technology partner that can elevate the family experience, drive operational efficiencies, and connect school communities. Community Brands is that partner and is proud to serve over 5,000 private and independent schools nationwide. Community Brands K-12 experts will help you find the perfect solution to evolve with your school and provide best-in-class support throughout your journey. Visit communitybrands.com/schools to learn more about how their purpose-built solutions fuel school success. Production and engineering by Pete Wright and True Story FM. Music this week is by Anthony Vega and Zach Nelson. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we hope you'll consider doing just that for our show. But the best thing that you can do to support the Net Assets Podcast is simply to share the show with a colleague. Thank you for listening.